Hello. In 1816, Sophie Germain became the first woman to win the Grand Prix des Mathématiques, awarded by the class of Mathematics and Physics of the French Institute for her theory of vibrations of general curved and plane elastic surfaces. And yet, she did not attend the ceremony award due to a malfunction of receiving the award letter together with her tickets for the ceremony. What she received instead was a cold letter at the 11th hour advising her that she was invited to attend, which she did not. In considering the letter that Germain never received as a sign of the times, in this paper, I look into the role of mathematical correspondence in both including and excluding women from the world of science during the early modern period and beyond. My approach draws on archival research with Germain's mathematical correspondence in the archives and manuscripts of La Bibliothèque Nationale de France and at the Biblioteca Moreniana de Firenze, and emerges from a wider project of writing a feminist genealogy of automathographies, which is funded by the Leverhulme Trust. Sophie Germain was a French mathematician and philosopher. She never got a formal education, but she read widely in her father's library, and then later, using the pseudonym of Monsieur Leblanc, managed to obtain lecture notes for courses from the newly organized École Polytechnique in Paris. This is how she met Joseph-Louis Lagrange and Adrien-Marie Legendre, amongst other mathematicians and scientists. Legendre, in particular, remained a strong source of support and encouragement to her for several years. Germain's early work was in number theory, a subject which occupied her thought throughout her life. In 1804, she initiated a correspondence with Gauss under her male pseudonym Leblanc. She was also interested in elasticity, and this is how she decided to take part in a contest initiated by the Paris Academy of Science for a mathematical account of the phenomena exhibited in experiments of vibrating plates. After two failed attempts in 1811 and 1813, Germain finally won the prize in 1816 and thus established herself as a mathematician. Her other contribution is in the spheres of philosophy and sociology, and her work of classifying facts and generalizing them as laws was influential for later thinkers, such as Auguste Comte, in setting the scientific grounds of sociology. She died at the age of 55 after being diagnosed with breast cancer, and an honorary degree by the University of Göttingen was conferred upon her 6 years after her death. In their meticulous study of Germain's mathematical correspondence, Andrea Del Centina and Alessandra Fioccia have discussed how Germain's letters were dispersed after her death, while the process of their rediscovery, which started in the late 1870s, is still ongoing. In this context, there are three types of documents that I have looked at while working with Germain's letters. First, digitized letters at the Archive of Gallica, the digital library of the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. B. Analog documents at the Moreniana Biblioteca in Florence, and C. Posthumously published correspondence. There is no space in this paper to discuss different insights that emerge from the engagement with different types of archival documents, but I will just give an example from the archive of the Moreniana Biblioteca in Florence, which I visited in May 2023 to read Germaine's letters there to her friend, fellow mathematician and first biographer Guglielmo Libri. And here we have a letter with a deletion. I have read with the greatest attention the memoir that you have made me the honor of sending me, Germaine writes. Since this is a draft letter of the one actually sent, we can see that she had initially written the greatest satisfaction. But the word is deleted and is replaced by the most appropriate attention. Being a woman mathematician, Germaine was afraid that satisfaction was too personal, too emotional perhaps, and she wanted to correct it. I was very much interested in this deletion, which does not appear in the published transcription of Germaine's letter by Del Centina. And here is just an example of the difference that going to an archive makes in relation to working with transcripts or published letters for this reason. The date of the letter is also important. It is July 2nd, 1819, 5 years before Germaine and Libri actually met in person in Paris in 1825 at one of the parties that the astronomer François Arago used to hold at the observatory every Thursday evening. So we can see that the two mathematicians had a kind of collaboration, not through meeting each other, but through correspondence. And this is very important if we consider that women were so much restricted in terms of traveling, for example, having the opportunity to meet their peers like their male colleagues did. So Germaine's encounter with Libri was important, not only because they shared ideas about mathematical problems, but also because they became friends, and eventually Libri became her first biographer, but also he archived her letters and papers. This was because despite his abilities as a mathematician and the fact that some of his theorems in number theory are still quoted, Libri's passion turned out to be documenting and writing the history of mathematics. And through this interest, he became an avid collector of rare books and manuscripts. He turned out to own one of the largest private libraries in Europe, but the way he had actually collected these manuscripts was not always clear and straightforward. And later on in life, he was accused as being a stealer of books and manuscripts. And when defending himself, he was saying, I found them so neglected that the only way I could save them was to take them. Okay, then. Libri had to flee Paris after the demise of the 1848 revolution, and a large part of his archive, which included some of Germaine's letters, were confiscated, although they are now housed at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Some of the manuscripts and letters that Libri took with him were later sold at an auction that he held in London in 1859. In the same year, the French Academy received another part of Germaine's archive as a donation from her sister and her nephew. When Libri died 10 years later, his archive and therefore Germaine's papers, manuscripts, and letters were dispersed, while half of Libri's archive, including his correspondence with Germaine, has been lost for good. Or they might appear someday unexpectedly, given that Germaine's archive is still open with several unanswered questions demanding further research. As I have written elsewhere at length, women did not get the opportunity to have collections of their papers or fonts created in the archival tradition, whether they were literary theorists, artists, activists, or scientists. Their papers are usually included in the fonts of famous men dispersed in different archives around the world, if at all. But let us return to the award letter. Its cold and patronizing tone notwithstanding, what is the discursive context of this letter? What is the sender trying to say, and how is the receiver supposed to read it and respond? Mr. Delambre has the honor to present his compliments to Mademoiselle Germaine and sends her 2 institute tickets, although presuming her friends will ask for more than she has to distribute, if, as he supposes, she has received them yesterday or today. But Mr. Delambre, having learned from Mr. Sedillot that Mademoiselle Germaine had not yet received them last night, he fears that there was some oversight and requests in this case to resort to him. Because the tickets are printed out, he may supply a ticket in hand for as many people as it will suit Mademoiselle Germaine to tell him. The overall tone of the letter is condescending, perhaps expressing the fact that Germaine won the award, being the only candidate for 3 consecutive submissions, and with some reservations by the award committee. Delambre is openly uncomfortable, and he does not even try to apologize for the delay in sending her the letter and her tickets for the ceremony. It is no wonder that under the circumstances, Germaine decided not to attend the ceremony, although we can never be sure about her decision not to attend. It is possible that she felt excluded, not only from the ceremony, but from the whole ambience of the Institut de France, not only because of her gender, but also because she was a young single woman, not supported by any scientist, father, brother, husband, or even lover, as it was the case with other women who dared trespass in the world of science and mathematics in the early modern period. Here it is important to know that when Mary Somerville visited France with her husband 1 year later, she was warmly welcomed by the same circle of scientists and mathematicians in Paris, met their wives, was invited in their chateaux, and dined and wined with them, but she was never introduced to Sophie Germaine. Brigitte Stenhouse has written about how William Somerville's support for his wife, as well as about the importance of scientific households in the circulation of mathematics in 19th century Britain. It seems, however, that such arrangements were limited for single women like Germaine, despite her important and original contribution in the mathematical sciences in post-revolutionary France. It is perhaps on the grounds of such heteropatriarchal regimes that Germaine never attended her awards ceremony and was never introduced to Somerville. To return to the award letter, despite its celebratory message in announcing to young Germaine that she was the first woman in history to have been awarded such a prestigious prize, it effectively excluded her from living the experience of her extraordinary distinction, as well as feeling the ephemeral sense of belonging to the world of science, the recognition of her contribution notwithstanding. Thus, while it was through correspondence that Germaine entered the world of mathematics, it was also through correspondence that she was also excluded from it. This is what she wrote to her friend Libri 10 years later, on September 15, 1826. I'm not surprised at your eagerness to renew conversations that cannot be found elsewhere than in Paris. All the doors are open to you. As I am not allowed to go to any sessions, I find myself almost as foreign to the movement of science as if I lived in another country. And yet, I prefer to be here even more than elsewhere, because sometimes it happens to me to find by chance an opportunity to instruct myself. You would perhaps not believe that being in the middle of Paris, I cannot succeed in seeing Monsieur Savard, who has made 1,000 interesting experiments. He shows them to people who can make no use of them. These facts are in my domain and mine alone, but they stay hidden. Here is the privilege of the ladies. They obtain compliments and no real advantages. Thank you.